Bullshit.
The No BS Marketing Show is brought to you by Laramore's men's and women's designer clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich. Our guest today is Sean Ellis of Growth Hackers. In episode 1, he talked about his first couple of stints when he focused on 3 major things about working closely with engineering to be able to track everything, which sounds very commonplace today, but back in the 90s, mid to late 90s, that was certainly not the case. Second thing was that he wanted to convince advertisers that advertising companies that he didn't need to spend 10 to 20 grand to realize if something was working or not working. He convinced them to let him spend $500 because if it worked, they might get 200,000 as opposed to getting 10,000 one time. And he battled through that and saw some success. But his biggest breakthrough was when he rethought how advertising works and decided to take the product to the customer by taking games to people, by embedding a widget on websites. He tied that back to some things in 1997 with Amazon's affiliate program and Hewlett-Packard's having a banner and a game inside the banner. He was able to take those things and apply all that to help his companies grow, and Log Me In had some success, and he had walked us through all of that as part of episode 1. And now we're moving into episode 2, and I think it's time, Sean, if you can go ahead now into Dropbox and Eventbrite and talk about how those things happen and how you applied what you did in those first couple of companies to these name brands as you were the first marketer there. And so you basically were helping to build the marketing foundation.
Yeah. So what I did in each of these companies was I basically had an agreement with the CEO that they were going to be my primary point of contact. What I didn't want to happen was sort of that I'm just tasked with figuring this stuff out on my own. And again, then I'm isolated from some of these other groups within the business that have been really important in previous companies for driving growth. So it was the CEO and myself are going to figure out how to grow this business. And then I came in with a very detailed game plan of just how we were going to sequence the go-to-market approach for these businesses. And so it was everything from here's the tracking system that we want to put in place. You didn't have a lot of the off-the-shelf user-based tracking systems that exist today, like a Kissmetrics or a Mixpanel or an Amplitude. So a lot of it had to be custom built in-house, but I really came in with a spec of what that tracking system should look like. And then I did a lot. So before I started with any of these companies, I was not going customer zero this time. What I was doing was taking sort of pre-scale customers on these businesses and trying to say, okay, is there enough customers on there where I can actually engage with them, figure out what they love about the product, and then start to build a value delivery engine that got other people to that state of usage in the product. So it was everything from I'd find out who considered the product a must-have, and I would do that by asking them, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? And I was looking for people to say, I'd be very disappointed without the product. That told me it was a must-have. And then I was really trying to figure out how they were using the product, what was the benefit they were getting from the product, and then ultimately build messaging that set the right expectations for future people who would come in and check out the product. So it was a positioning exercise, but I would say even more than a positioning exercise, it was a promise exercise. It was, what is the product promise, and how can I set the right expectations for future users of what this product is truly great at delivering? And then everything else in the first 6 months was around how do I optimize that end-to-end customer experience from initial promise to must-have user experience. Where are the bottlenecks in that customer onboarding? Where's the confusion? Where are the times where there's not enough desire to overcome any friction that they hit? And it was just a lot of research and experimentation to essentially get it so that it was primarily channel discovery after the 6 months when I would be leaving the company. And so then I could train somebody in the channel discovery process. But that's something I didn't want to train people on the one-off stuff because it was easier for me to just go and do that. And so a lot of that kind of growth transition activity was something that I just got really good at doing, had lots of templates and just a really systematic approach to getting these companies ready for growth, and then would help to have somebody else kind of take it to the next level in terms of growing the business.
Sean, a couple of things. You said that you wanted to find out if they were must-haves, and you would ask this question something to the effect, how would you feel if you could never use this product again? Is that the question? Mm-hmm. Okay.
No longer use the product, but basically the same thing.
No, yeah. So when you were doing that, like just gut feel, was a percentage of people that answered that they'd feel terrible? Was that like 5%, 10%, or was it such a high percent that you were pumped going, wow, we got a bunch of people in this must-have category?
So it was interesting. What I found was that every company that became pretty easy to grow was above 40%. 40% seemed to be this kind of magic number where, majority of people try to sign up for this are able to figure it out. And now I just need to basically, take that friction out and then start turning up the heat. But I had one company that when I ran the survey, I'd already committed to. It was the last time that I committed to 6 months before running the survey. So after that, I ran the survey and then decided if I was going to commit. But I had one company where I ran the survey and it was only 5% of the people who said they'd be very disappointed without the product. And I think I had just kind of gotten lucky on the first couple where they were both Dropbox and Eventbrite were above 50%. And so those were the raw materials I had to work with as a marketer. Like that's pretty good when you go in there. But then this next company had 5%, and I kind of had my oh crap moment where I thought, oh my gosh, am I even going to be able to market this thing? But what was cool was that we were able to get it to 40% in 2 weeks.
How?
So the 5% of the people who said they'd be very disappointed without the product all indicated the same benefit that they were getting, and all had a really similar use case. And most of the other people hadn't found that use case. And so what we had to do was just basically essentially set the right promise. So these guys found that without a promise. So they kind of just stumbled into it. But so we set the right promise on what the product would do for them, and then essentially took all the promotion away from the things that didn't directly relate to that promise. So changed that customer onboarding to streamline them into the experience that made the product a must-have, and then essentially just surveyed the next cohort of people, and it hit 40%. Within 6 months, we had it at 60%. That's a multi-billion-dollar company now, but it was just a matter of they had started out and they had a lot going on in the product, a lot of different apps, and it turned out that just one of those apps was a really strong must-have experience. So that then became kind of front and center of the user experience, and today continues to be really what the company is known for.
Help me to understand, though. You go in and you know that you've got this 50% must-have mindset of Dropbox and Eventbrite. At that point, what makes you stick with the 6 months rather than being part of it longer?
So I'm kind of weird this way. I would have done really well if I stayed with Dropbox, for example, for longer. But it was one of those things where I was really passionate about. I had this feeling that the majority of companies, the most important stage in taking a company to market is the first 6 months, and that nobody has very much experience there, because if they're good at it, then they have stock options that vest over the next 4 years. And so they don't get compensated for being good at it unless they stick around for 4 years. And so most people do. And then if they're bad at it and they get another chance, it basically means that they get fired or they quit or whatever. then then they're just not going to get very many opportunities to do it again if they keep failing. And so that basically, just the whole system was set up so that nobody could get lots of cycles in taking new companies to market unless they were a consultant where they would then be somewhat lightly engaged in taking a company to market. But I really wanted to be deeply immersed in the company for those 6 months and have it be, I got to the point where I was doing a couple of them at a time, but it was still, I think I had so much more efficiency because I had it all planned out and the different templates and different things that I could go in and do it much more quickly that I was able to balance to. But so that's why I didn't stick with any company, because I really wanted the cycles of doing it, 10, 15 times to really try to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then the reason I stayed with this company was because I committed to them. I committed 6 months to them, and it's not like I'm in prison or something. I'll learn a lot, and I'm being compensated for it. It's just really, it was cash and equity, and it was really a question of, all right, well, my equity is probably not going to be worth anything, but at least I'm getting some cash on it, and so it didn't hurt to stay involved with them. And fortunately, again, it was to me, I think the big thing with that question of how would you feel if you could no longer use this product is that it's all of the other questions that I ask with that question that allow me to segment and find signals. So these types of people are, like if you just say, if it's 5% would be very disappointed with it without it. One segment might be men and women. And if women are 2%, then that means that men are going to be 8% because it's going to average to the 5%. Or that basically when you start segments, there's going to be something that's better than the others. And then the most important segment for me was really the benefit segment. What is the primary benefit that you're getting from this product? And I started as an open-ended question where it says write in, but then I look for the signal, and then future people, I do it as a multiple choice question. And I can start to say, gosh, people who focus on this benefit, they're like 40% likely to consider it a must have. And so that's really how I honed the benefit that ultimately became the value around which this company was built and continues to be built today.
The value insights from a marketing standpoint that you've given us in episodes 1 and even now in episode 2 even more is fantastic when you're talking about these questions and you're talking about having, and I love your point. It's not just that one question. We could give that one question to anybody and they can go ask it and not get any kind of results. It's the questions you ask before, the questions you ask after. It's how you listen, how you respond. That's what happens at Mass Solutions is people will say, well, what's your process? And we tell them the process, and you could take our process and apply it and you'll still do reasonably well. But when you take our process and you have the talent with the expertise and experience, that's what makes it something special. And that's what you were doing with all of these instances of applying these great questions and using your channel discovery and finding out the different segments and then responding to those segments with your creative marketing solutions really is what made you able to do this for some major companies.
Yeah, and of course, each success opens the door to additional opportunities. So that was kind of optimizing more on trying to not be in places where it was going to be so challenging that I would fail. Then that might prevent me from being able to get into the next good opportunity.
Hey, no BSers. I love Laramore's men's and women's designer clothing. It's time for you to take your look to the next level. Laramore's is the place to make it happen for you. How do I know? Because they've helped me for years. You talk about combining professionalism and style. That's what happens when you go with Laramore's. You can shop online at laramores.com or in store in downtown Pittsburgh. With Sean Ellis of Growth Hackers on the No BS Marketing Show, I'm Dave Mastovich. Sean, other than family, who are your mentors and how have they impacted you?
A lot of this was a lot of the things that I did in the marketing space was was sort of just self kind of geeking out about it. Like, I think especially in the mid 90s, there weren't really books that I could read about it. And there weren't people who had a ton of experience that I could tap into. So I would say that my main mentor, really has been more of an overall business mentor. And that's Mike Simon, the guy who had founded, Uproar and Log Me In. He was one of the people who put the right amount of pressure on me to keep pushing things to a high level, but also gave me the space to be able to, get out of my lane a bit from the marketing perspective, like be able to then go in and connect with the development team. And most of the time I had to go through him. If I went direct, they would push me out just like any other marketer gets pushed out of engineering. But yeah, so he's just, he has really sharp instincts around business. And so I learned a lot. And he used to say all the time, it's better to be lucky than smart. And I do think luck is involved a lot in this. And as I mentioned, like the first two companies after Log Me In and Uproar actually there was one company, Zobni, that was in between, that still sold for $60 million. So it wasn't like a total failure, but it didn't hit the $1 billion valuations that the other ones did. But that ultimately being able to go into a company that has that potential as a marketer, really all you can do is help a company reach its potential. But the potential is defined by the solution itself and who needs that solution. And so, I got very lucky in having the ability to work on some solutions that had a lot of market potential around them. And it was just really about trying to connect the dots to the people who needed it.
Sean, talk about a learning experience when maybe you were a BS employee or consultant, a tough boss, or your communication wasn't what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS? What'd you do to fix it? And
never. I've always been perfect. No, just kidding. I would say, looking back, probably my most sort of embarrassing period was at Log Me in my interactions with the sales team. I think in a high pressure situation when you've got to hit big numbers, there's just a lot of finger pointing that happens. Like if the numbers aren't being hit, sales is saying marketing's not generating the leads, and marketing says sales is not effectively following up on the leads, and that there's just a lot of that. And I think it was a tough environment for a while there, and I embarrassingly had outbursts in the office where I would yell at the top of my lungs at somebody, and just I felt a lot of the pressure. Again, like with the previous company, I had invested a lot of personal money into the business. And so I think there's just a lot of high pressure situations. There's, now as a founder CEO, the pressure gets even higher. And sometimes we let the pressure get to us. And it's, I think maturity does help over time, and being able to take a deep breath and handle the pressure, and learn how to do self-hypnosis. If I'm, Calm app helps me quite a bit now. If I find that I'm being too short with people, I'll close my door and do a 5-minute Calm app session and try to get my head back on straight. But yeah, that was definitely a period. I mean, and there was a little bit of that I'll be honest, that I, when I came out of Log Me In, because of some of that pressure and stress and the other things, I said, I'm never working for anyone else ever again. And I just, to me, I'm going to do these 6-month stints. A part of the 6-month stints was to learn and to get really good at taking companies to market. But part of it was, gosh, if a company gets to the point where Log Me In gets, and it's really successful, and it's still not fun and unpleasant to work there, then what is most companies are going to fail. So basically, all paths in every role leads to misery. I gotta figure out a way to define my exit when I make my entrance. And so that was part of what drove me there. And I think part of it was just that reaction to Log Me In. I guess the other piece of that is then I thought, all right, well, if I become a founder and CEO myself and the environment gets bad, then that's all on me. A part of what I need to do is create an environment that I want to enjoy working in and that other people want to enjoy working in. But yeah, so there's definitely some BS moments on my part along the way, and yeah, that's embarrassed looking back at some of them.
I wouldn't say to be embarrassed. What I like about you, and I've been impressed just reading up and preparing for today's interview, and the interview's gone really well, clicking for just only talking via email and LinkedIn. I like the fact that you have a great combination of courage, humbleness, and self-awareness, because I think those are three huge traits of leaders. You've had the courage throughout your career to do things that most people will kind of shudder and get shook by, just throughout jumping, leaving the country, starting another business, leaving one business, signing on for 6 months, knowing you only got 6 months, high pressure. But then you're humble enough to admit and say, like, there's a couple times at these jobs where I wasn't the best me. And that's what I always tell stories. I say there's a couple of toxic cultures I was a part of that led to Mass Solutions. Mass Solutions is in existence because I was a part of toxic cultures and I didn't respond as well as I should have. So you have to be humble. And then the self-awareness of you saying, I could feel it. I need to use this app to calm myself down now again. I can actually feel when I'm about to do something that's this behavior that I don't like. And it's not like I throw things at the wall. It's just a matter of I get silent a lot when I'm frustrated, and I have to fight through that. So I think I like the humble, the courage, and the self-awareness. So I really respect that and appreciate you bringing that up. There's a bunch of other things I want to get to, though, because just really impressive how you've done this. But I do have to ask one quick question about the biggest one on your list is the first ever marketer building the growth foundation for Dropbox. Do you stay in touch with anybody at Dropbox?
Yeah, I did a little bit, but it's a really big company now, and I just, it's one of those things that I look at like, as Drew went on to become a billionaire, and all of those things. I just hate the feeling of just like, hey, I'm holding on so that I can be buddies with a billionaire or something. It's just like, I wish the best for him, but I just don't want to be a groupie or whatever. So I think that's part of my just move on and do the next thing that has kind of caused me to not be in touch with them as much.
Makes sense. You coined a term, and I love it. I'm a messaging guy. You coined a term that really is something that's used a lot. So I think kudos to you. But you coined the term growth hacker. Talk about that from the big idea standpoint, where you had a why, your reason for being, but you also had to know your customers' why, people that were going to listen and apply this growth hacker mentality. Talk about how you decided to use this phrase and to coin it, and how you've pushed it and written a book, and you've got a platform all around it. It's just really cool. So maybe just walk us through that whole thing. Define growth hacker, define when it hit you that this is a great term, and just talk about
it. Sure. Yeah, I think, I'm kind of in a similar state right now as at the time when I came up with the term growth hacker and growth hacking. It's when you see something that's kind of feels so broken that, the debate of no, it should be this way or no, it should be that way, is almost like a pointless debate. So for me, that's sort of how I thought about marketing at the time. I just, especially as I was moving on from companies like Dropbox and was looking at the people who were applying for the role to run marketing at these different companies, and I just saw, they were right in how they thought about marketing. They were thinking about marketing as it's taught in a textbook, but I was looking at a company like Dropbox who was just really still getting started at that point and thinking, that company does not have the luxury to do everything on every page in a marketing textbook. That essentially, that's still survival mode. It's still like sink or swim. The company's vulnerable to death, and so everything has to be quantifiably tied to how does that impact short-term and long-term growth, sustainable growth. How do we get more people using the solution and benefiting from the solution. And if you can't have that direct connection to that, then at the stage that Dropbox is at, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And so so for me, when I kind of looked at each of these companies, I was really thinking about the term growth hacking in terms of startups, and just that they didn't have the luxury of doing everything within that marketing, that standard marketing playbook. And at the same time, a lot of what they were doing was, or what they should be doing, was outside the scope of what marketers were trusted with. So like when I talk about some of the interaction that I had with engineering and with others, that onboarding is such a huge part of success in a web-based property. It's not just about getting them interested and getting them to the front door. You actually have to bring them all the way to value. And if you don't, they're unlikely to ever come back. And so that extends beyond the trust of most marketers. And so for me, I felt like I had to kind of define a new role around what actually works, and that the best way to do that was just to put a new name on it. And so I invited a couple of friends out for drinks, and I was just saying, I feel like the most successful companies are doing this differently, and it looks about like this on how they're approaching growth. And I think it needs a different name for people to take notice of it. And so that was kind of the start of it. And we talked among ourselves, and I really like the life hacking. So for me, it was less about, the engineering hacking where I wanted to use the term hacking, and it was more about just the creative problem solving hacking that led to the name. And then I felt like growth had to be a part of it. Like it was outcome oriented, where marketing was more what you do, growth is what you achieve. And so growth hacking was the word that we came up with. And what was funny is that I actually remember saying to the guys, I think that this could actually, we could be coining a term here. I think that this could actually be something that people talk about long term. And I remember one of them saying, you don't just coin a term. It doesn't work like that. And yeah, maybe you're right. But and so anyway, it was kind of funny that it stuck. And one thing where we got really lucky on was that I put a blog post about it, and then it was noticed. A lot of people interacted with it, but it was still on a pretty underground level. And then Andrew Chen did a blog post about 6 months later where he said growth hacker is the new VP of marketing, and he had a pretty big following on his blog, and that's what really helped to propel it into the limelight more.
If you had to give our listeners one tip of how they could become better at growth hacking or being a growth hacker, what's the one tip you'd give them?
Just quantify the impact of everything. Just work to quantify the impact of everything. Question everything you're doing, and work hard to justify it into how that actually relates to growth.
Sean Ellis of Growth Hackers. Our audience loves when our guests give them a tool that they can use. You probably got a ton of them, but pick a tool that'll help our audience in any way you think you can help them. It could be to tell their story, craft their message, communicate internally, externally, or it could be a productivity tool that you think could help our listeners.
So I would probably say this Google Optimize. I think that testing is so important for learning, and that a product like Google Optimize, first, it's free, so it's a pretty nice when a tool is free, and it just makes it really easy to run some of the testing, whether it's around messaging or around page layouts and other things that as marketers, if we have to use all of our creative energy to beg for development resources to be able to run tests, there's just not a lot of leftover creative resources to actually come up with those tests. And so it's very enabling technology when you can have things like, just the tracking tools that are out there as well, the amplitudes or the KISS metrics, where, in the past, you either had to be, you needed to know SQL to run your own queries, or you had to rely on someone else to do that. Now these tools basically make it very easy to study how people are using your product and the paths they take and where they come from, and you can write your own queries in those products pretty well. So to me, it's sort of the information piece of and even Amplitude would be another one I would add to the list, where Amplitude, you have 10 million free events or user actions per month. So you can do a lot with free tools today to basically be able to understand what's going on and then test to improve what's going on. And I think that's a big part of helping to accelerate growth.
Sean, was there anything else you'd like to add, or anything you thought I'd asked that I didn't?
Yeah, one thing that I wanted to add that I forgot to mention on Dropbox was one thing when I was going into Dropbox that had been really frustrating at LogMeIn was this external dependency on spending that we ended up building at LogMeIn, where so much of our growth, I think we had 80% of our users by the time I left were coming in via word of mouth, which is awesome. So your base does contribute a lot to your growth. But a lot of what we were actively doing as a team was around managing spend, and a lot of that through search engine marketing. But the problem is when you get into I think we had 100 million active devices on the network when I left LogMeIn, and adding like 100,000 a day. How do you come up with a new a new channel that can move the needle when you have numbers that big? So you just naturally, your growth will start to plateau when the numbers get too big that way. Like at least from a that word of mouth helped to build off that base, but from the actions that we were doing, we weren't doing a whole lot to be able to try to accelerate growth or even maintain a growth rate. So when I got to Dropbox, I really said we have to figure out how to make our primary growth engine for this business the existing customers, and that as this business grows, the more that the existing customer base is feeding that growth, then size is not an enemy over time. Size is an asset that can be leveraged to drive even more growth. So I think that line of thinking is what led to the referral program and to continue to optimize different viral loops within the product that have really been the engine of growth behind that business. And so that would be taking the learning from a trap that I eventually fell into with LogMeIn and avoiding that trap as I got into Dropbox.
Sean Ellis of Growth Hackers, thanks for being on the show.
All right, thanks, Dave. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show, brought to you by Laramore's Men's and Women's Designer Clothing. Free shipping, free returns. Shop men's and women's designer clothing, shoes, accessories, jewelry, and more online at laramores.com or in-store downtown Pittsburgh. Visit masssolutions.biz for show notes, plus additional marketing and messaging resources like our No BS Marketing Weekly Update. Sign up and receive timely, valuable ideas to improve your marketing and transform your message. Again, visit masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.